welcome everyone. This is Take the Lead, Change the Game, a podcast for women leaders looking to deepen their knowledge and skills and find enjoyment in the process. We are powered by Software Leadership. Software Leadership is a cohort-based coaching experience designed to fuel courage and ignite impact among women professionals. I'm Mindy Gulati, and I'm here with my co-host, Lindsay Goldford Gray. We're the co-founders of Software. Together, we bring a blend of leadership coaching, strategy, and lived experience to help women navigate challenges, seize opportunities, and lead with confidence. Today, we're going to continue our discussion of psychological safety. We did a couple episodes earlier in March, and now we're going to dive into the research of Dr. Timothy Clark and his 4 stages of psychological safety. I really love the way that Timothy Clark frames things. I like things in stages or categories or groups. It's easy to remember and it's easy to guide decision making. I use these stages when I assess cultures. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to bring in Lindsay to kind of start going over the different stages. But a lot of times I get called in to work with cultures. They could be law firms, they could be companies, all kinds of industries. To figure out what's going on with their culture, especially around high-performing teams, around employee engagement and satisfaction. And one of the first assessments that I do is on psychological safety and to really gauge whether it's occurring. And what I like to do is to do both a manager-specific assessment, and then I also do an employee assessment. And as we kind of go through these stages, I'll give you some ideas as a manager, as a leader, some of the questions you can ask yourself to determine how psychologically safe your team is and how your organization is. And I really like laying them out in stages because you can't get to stage 2 till you have accomplished stage 1. And the one thing I'm going to put a warning out there is even if you're at stage 4, which it's kind of rare to find a stage 4, but even if you're there, it doesn't mean you don't pay attention to ensuring that stage 1, 2, and 3 are still in place. It's really like a cycle. And especially if you gain new people on your team or your company changes in some ways. I work with lots of companies that do mergers and acquisitions, and you sort of reset to stage 1 to make sure you have that inclusion safety in place. So I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay. Lindsay, talk to us about what stage 1 is, and then we'll give you all some examples.
Yeah, so stage 1 is inclusion safety. So this is really our sense of belonging and allows us to operate, without fear of rejection or embarrassment or punishment. And we are acknowledging our shared humanity and rejecting false theories of superiority. It's where people really feel safe to be themselves, their authentic selves, and they're feeling valued for their unique identity and skill set. So, a lot of us are probably most familiar with this area with inclusion safety, but Mindy, can you think of a few examples or an example from where you see inclusion safety play out or not?
Yeah, so when I'm assessing inclusion safety, I will have the leader, the manager, ask a couple questions, and some of those are, do I foster social interactions on my team that promote a sense of belonging? Do I actively seek and value the different perspectives on my team? Do I include them? That's what we're really looking for is inclusion. And inclusion is really just making people feel seen, valued, and heard. And the one thing I'll say is, unfortunately, there's a lot of environments where they're not even at stage 1. And when you're not at stage 1, an example of that is when new people come onto your team. And I actually have a client who says this explicitly in their onboarding, which is wild to me, but it still exists. They say, we don't trust you until you've worked with us for 5 years. So that's an example of not being at stage 1 because you're not included. You're seen as like someone separate from us, not part of the team yet. How about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I think fostering the social dynamics part is really important and especially challenging when you're working remotely. I think I've talked before on previous podcasts about the question of the day that I used to do at the nonprofit that I ran. And that was always really interesting. And you found out personal tidbits of information from people. One of the things that I think presented challenges at times or just sort of like flagged for me is that we had, people from quite diverse backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And there would be times like someone would mention a song or a food or a TV show that nobody else was familiar with. Mm-hmm. so that is a moment where you either create inclusion safety or you don't, right? Like very clearly. And so saying, oh, tell me more about that song, or like, what is the show about? Did you watch it as a kid? Like those kinds of things really foster this sense of belonging where people can bring their full authentic selves, and they feel wanted, as opposed to people being like, oh, I don't know what that is, so I'll just like turn and talk to this person over here, right? And so that's some way I've seen it play out too.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point you make, because all of us have other things going on in our lives than work. And so as a manager or leader, you want to at least be attuned to what's going on with people. And that makes them feel included. And what psychological safety does, if you remember, it really allows people to bring their talents for you as a leader to optimize those talents. And this is how you have a really high functioning organization. And so this isn't just to make people feel good. There's a business incentive here in a lot of ways. And efficiency, innovation, all of that can't happen when there's not psychological safety.
Yeah. I also think the gender piece of that, and especially for primarily women with young children, but men too, where the phase of life is kind of all consuming. And there are certainly workplaces where it is not it's not seen as okay to talk about what's going on at home. And that can really be a barrier to someone's ability to be productive at work.
Yeah, for sure. So after, if you've accomplished stage 1, you move to stage 2. So stage 2 is called learner safety, according to Dr. Clark. This means we feel safe to engage in all aspects of the learning process in the workplace. So this is like asking questions, getting and giving feedback, experimenting, trying new things. And then what's really critical here is being able to make mistakes while you learn, and you're not punished in some way for making those mistakes. And so not only are you included, but then, if you make a mistake, or you go ask questions, or you don't know something and you need some training around it, that you're not going to be punished or bullied or treated differently in some way because of that. And I want to sort of point out here is this is another area where women and people of color often face harsher repercussions when they make a mistake. Because when a woman or a Black person or an Asian woman makes a mistake, oftentimes they're seen as, well, they made a mistake because of this identifier of who they are, not just they're a human and humans make mistakes. And so it can really be troubling. And so as a leader, if you really want to assess learner safety, you do have to ask, like, how do I respond when people make mistakes? What do I do? Do I assign blame? Do I get frustrated? And then you want to evaluate, is there a disparity in how I react to mistakes? And so learner safety is, it's about creating a learning environment, learning opportunities, mentoring, training, ride-alongs, those kinds of things. But it's also, what do you do when someone makes a mistake? And as a leader, you want to, as like sort of laying the foundation for learner safety, is give people a sense of appreciation, that you see them, that you see their work, that they're valuable. You should give feedback when you notice that someone's done something well or learned something new, like, hey, you took this assignment on, it was really hard and you learned, and that was fantastic. That creates that environment. And you do want to be, you do want to be asking yourself, though, I think the biggest thing for managers is, what do I do when someone fails or makes a mistake? What environment have I created around that? Lindsay, how about you? Have you seen any examples of this?
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning, and I was thinking about an example that Muna gave when she was a guest on the podcast. And Muna works in technology, and I would encourage everyone to listen to her episode. It was amazing. She had a great interview. She was in a meeting and new on the job, and asked a question that it was clear to her that everyone else in the room knew the answer to. Like it was a basic question, and everyone kind of like chuckled, or like, showed on their faces that she was asking a question and they perceived it to be basic. And the person who was leading the meeting in the room was like, hey team, hold up. Like, we've got to back up and make sure everyone in the room is on the same page, and kind of put the kibosh on the scrutiny or the
sneakers that were happening. Yeah.
And to me, that was like such a good example of learner safety where, I mean, and clearly was formative to Muna, who's now talking about it on a podcast years later, that was really pivotal for her. And in terms of, other learner safety, I feel like it's incredibly important to create space and time to ask questions. And one of the ways I see this play out in my work a lot is for women entrepreneurs and financial statements. So, we are not taught in law school how to read a profit and loss statement. And there's not a ton of safe spaces to ask, like, what does this line mean? What is net versus gross, right? Like, I mean, there's just these kind of, some people would perceive to be basic questions. And so creating a safe space for, like, it's okay that you don't know what this means. Like, no one's taught you how to do this. That's a way I see it. I try personally to create learner safety around that pretty regularly.
Yeah, I love that. And I love sort of the phrase that I use is like, how could you possibly know if you've never been taught this? Like, like, I don't know a lot of things. And as a leader, if you say things like that, and Muna's example is perfect because that person was like, hey, like, why are you laughing? She doesn't know. Like, how would she know if she's never been told this answer? Like, get it together, people. And that sends a message to everyone that you're safe, that you are, you can learn here and you're not going to be punished.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So our third stage of psychological safety is contributor safety. So we've gone from inclusion to learner and now contributor. And of course, contributor safety is present when we feel safe to participate and contribute as a full member of the team, using our skills and abilities in the creating value in our process, in our outcomes, and we lean into what we're doing with our best energy and enthusiasm. There are some things that are key indicators of contributor safety. A big one that really struck me was autonomy. So providing team members the freedom and discretion to execute their work. So this would play out as not micromanaging people. Active participation, so encouraging people to contribute. Recognition and support. I know we've talked about that a little bit, but certainly for their actual contributions and accomplishment. And then removing fear, which again, at different levels is sort of affecting all of them, where we should not, people can offer an idea that ultimately is not used or offer an idea that's not going to work, or things of that nature, all are sort of indicators of contributor safety. When have you seen this succeed or fail, Mindy?
Yeah. I would say I see this fail a lot, unfortunately. So usually when I do an assessment, this is where we end. This is where they're like, we're not at stage 3 yet. And a big reason is really this sense of autonomy and active participation. So it is very hard in any organization for people to let go of control and to allow people to have the ability to make decisions. The highest performing organizations I work with, though, they give a lot of autonomy. I work with an engineering firm that I think gives tremendous autonomy to their teams because their teams are very different. Some of their teams build airports, some build hospitals, some build rail and transit lines. And the CEO and the executive are like, you know best, go forth.
Yeah, right.
Buy the project, sell, hire, price the project. We're not getting involved in that. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
But that's the exception. So I would say when I do assessments, we often get to contributor safety and I say that's not happening. When we see contributor safety, it's really that people can suggest things and sometimes they're used. Not every time. This isn't about like you get your way every time, but they're really thought through. The company as a whole says, bring us your ideas. You know better than we do. And here's one thing why contributor safety is so important is if I'm doing a culture assessment, that's a little bit different than psychological safety assessment. I'm looking for, is this culture truly like an inclusive place? Inclusion doesn't just mean feeling seen and that you're accepted for who you are.
Yeah.
The hallmark is, can you contribute to the organization's success? That's the differentiator is, do people get to contribute to the organization's success? And if there's not contributor safety, people are not. And this is when people leave organizations, is because they're in their day-to-day, they're overly controlled. They're like, I have this really great idea and I can't get it through. And you know what they do? They find an organization that will go let them do that thing. And so you have to be really mindful as a leader. And some of the questions that I ask managers is, do I ensure that my team member skills are utilized and their expertise is actually part of our day-to-day use? And also, like, how do I delegate? Yeah. Delegation, I teach an entire class on delegation because most people don't know how to do it. And it is all about trust. Yeah. And so if you can't delegate, you're not going to have contributor safety. But a lot of times it's because you don't trust people. And so, that's sort of one thing I just want to add that layer here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest ways, sort of foster contributor safety is honestly to just ask other people for their opinions. Like, yeah. I definitely think the delegation piece is huge. In a group setting, say, hey, Mindy, what do you think about that? Right? Because people have thoughts and 3/4 of people probably don't speak up. And so really inviting others to give their opinion, I think is really helpful, sort of like a helpful starting point or baseline for contributor safety.
Yeah.
The other thing I see happen often, and honestly, I struggle with, is someone will offer an idea and what's happening in my brain is like, ooh, that's not going to work for XYZ reason, right? Mm-hmm. Like that won't work because of this. Mm-hmm. Often what happens is that thought just comes out of my mouth, right? Like I don't have a process and I'll just say like, ooh, that's not going to work. And I'll shoot the idea down. Mm-hmm. When instead, asking curious questions, because like they may have thought of the solution to whatever you're thinking, but if you shoot it down, they'll just be like, okay, walk away. Yeah. And so asking questions like, ooh, that's an interesting idea. I see XYZ being a challenge. Like, do you have any idea how you'd address that? Mm-hmm. And it's hard to like stop, especially as like I'm a fast processor. I tend to have like somewhat knee-jerk reactions. And so, really stopping and asking questions instead of providing judgment or assessment mm-hmm. right from the jump, I think can be really helpful for fostering contributor safety as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's an attorney I know, he's a general counsel, and he always says, help me understand. And that's how he prevents himself from jumping in and saying no. Instead, he says, help me understand a little bit more. And then he collects his thoughts, right? So that's a great point. Yeah. The last stage is challenger safety. And again, if you reach the stage, fantastic, awesome. But it's sort of a cycle. You got to make sure you're still keeping up with stage one. But challenger safety provides the support and confidence that we need to ask questions like, why do we do this in this way? What if we tried this, to go to Lindsay's point? How might we do this differently? So this is not just contributing by speaking up and saying, hey, I have an idea. Challenger safety is really challenging the status quo. And the status quo could be a process, it could be a decision, it could be, a strategy. And the key here is that you can challenge, but you don't face risk of retaliation or damaging your personal standing or reputation in the organization. Oftentimes people will speak up in an organization, they will challenge, but then when that meeting's over, people sort of whisper like, can you believe that? Can you believe that she would propose that? And that's not challenger safety, right? So challenger safety is like, I go in and I say, hey, Lindsay, you're the CEO of this company. Like your communication's really poor on this strategy. Like I see some big problems here. And you and I have a conversation and we work it out. And then we go through, we go about our ways. Maybe you take my advice, maybe you don't, but you still hold me in high regard. That's challenger safety. Yeah. But what often happens is after that meeting, you're going to go to your colleagues and be like, I can't stand her. I can't believe she would do that. Right. And this is where another layer of like bias, racism, sexism comes in, because oftentimes when women or people of color speak up and say, hey, red flag, this isn't going to work, they are punished disproportionately. Their reputation is really harmed. Do you have any examples of challenger safety?
Yeah, so I've been working with an organization since the fall, and prior to me coming on, uh, the leadership team had a big critical decisions, quite a lack of challenger safety. And so what happened is no one spoke up, and it created a false consensus
Mm-hmm.
around a proposal
Yeah.
that essentially blew up. Like eventually the cracks opened and it just blew up in everyone's faces, and it created so much relational damage. It
Mm-hmm.
had really, really, really strong effects on the organization. And the the sort of norms around voting were that they wanted unanimity. And I came on board and I started asking questions and sometimes being like, I just don't agree. And the group would be like, oh, should we wait to vote? And I would be like, well, I'm not going to change my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just, like, I'm just one person out
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
7 or whatever, like, or 9 or whatever it is. It's like, we can vote. But there was so much discomfort around the fact that someone dissented.
Mm-hmm.
And so they like didn't even want to vote. And it
Yeah.
was really interesting. And so now I have a Ruth Bader Ginsburg sweatshirt that says peace, love, dissent. And now I wear it to the meetings.
That's fun. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really my attempt. Like I mean, we're lawyers. There's a lot of dissent happening all the time. And so I'm very comfortable with challenging, status quo or ideas. But I do things like that, like wear the sweatshirt and kind of make a joke out of it, because it's my attempt to foster challenger safety for everyone else, because it's like, oh, well, if Lindsay, one person, like, not that it's me individually, but because one person is doing it now, like, it's okay for me to do it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this play out. I went on a walk with one of the leadership team members who I actually had not spent much time with. And we were chatting, and a couple of different times he was like, "Ooh, I think I'm going to have to disagree with you there." Like, and I finished the walk and I was like, this is so great. Like, that he just can be like, I don't know that I agree with you. And it feels really good. It's a long arc.
Yeah. No, and as a manager, you want to ask yourself things like, am I getting feedback that's real from my team?
Yeah.
What do I do when there's dissent? Like, and not just what do you do like verbally, but what is your body language? How do you react? Do you foster a culture of critical thinking, constructive dissent? And again, dissent isn't like arguing, playing devil's advocate. Like, dissent is like, hey, I have something I really want to point out. And I will tell you, I have seen companies where they're very far from challenger safety, and it costs them actual millions and millions and millions of dollars a year because people are scared to speak up, and they know there's a problem, and they see it, but they're like, I can't possibly challenge this person, so I'm just gonna be quiet. And one of my clients, they had what's called a variance on an engineering project, millions of dollars. And I am 100% sure it's because there's no challenger safety. And everyone was just like, I'm just going to stay in my lane.
Right.
I see it, but I'm not my problem. And that really it can bring down a company if the company's, small, for sure. So anyhow, I think it's really important for us as leaders to, first reflect on, do we create psychological safety on our teams? There's ways to assess what's going on. But I love these sort of stages because it keeps you on track of like, where am I at? Where do I want to get to go? And how do I get there? But a lot of this takes some really deep self-reflection and getting good feedback. And so keep that in mind. If you want to create these environments, you have to be getting real, honest feedback.
Yep. And fostering a place where people can do that.
For sure.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thanks again for another wonderful episode, and we will see you all next week.
All right. Bye, everyone. Take care.